Okay, now I think we are now connected to the audience. Thank you for being back with us on this afternoon edition of the second summit for Latin American sustainability in fisheries and aquaculture. It's my pleasure to introduce you our keynote speaker, Arlin Wasserman, from the organization called Changing Tastes that tells you a lot about what we're going to hear now. I'm going to say a few words about Arlin, his experience. He's been for the last 20 years working in the food industry. So he is not only expert or has expertise in seafood, but all in different types of food for humans. His experience has been basically to identify and catalyze changes in tendencies of business and consumers' perceptions about food. So he's expert on that field. A little bit of his experience go back to working with General Mills, a very important company in the US, helping them to put together the first sustainability strategy for this company. And also has a very important role in linking the organic foods with health, with human health. Over the years, he's been also doing a lot of work to raise consciousness about antibiotics in dairy products and livestock production, and the use of plants for food as an important element to reduce the carbon footprint of producing food. He's also been part of the first national program in the US to recycle in different neighborhoods, and has numerous awards and recognitions from government, business entities, academia, and so forth. So you can see more of his curriculum in the webpage of the summit. And so, Arlin, the floor is yours. You have 25 minutes to tell us about changing tastes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luis, for the introduction. And as you said, we're going to talk about fish, seafood, sustainability, and to think of it as food, because sustainability is much easier to get down if it tastes delicious. And that's a bit of what we have tried to do, is to make this work within the business of the food industry. Today, we'll look at opportunities in the US market over the next 1 or 2 years, and how sustainability and the surprising and unfortunate arrival of COVID-19 are shaping the market. First, I want to share the extremely good news that, as we all know, the value of seafood traded globally and the value of seafood imported into the US are both continuing to increase year over year over year. And even when we've looked at the impact of COVID-19 on how we eat, which we'll explore during the next 25 minutes, that increase is we forecast will continue for many years to come. The challenge for those of us who produce fish and seafood, either catch or farm it, is that many of us are caught in the commodity trap. And that is, well, globally or in the US, we love to buy and to eat salmon or shrimp or crab or all sorts of other things when we think of them as just a species or type of fish, without regard for where they come from or how they are produced. Low price matters most. And as long as producers in Latin America are competing on price with anyone else who catches or farms the same species anywhere else in the world, there's really no way to get a better price, even if you farm better, as long as you are competing against every other producer in the planet. low price is the price.
Arlin,
So
sorry
part
for
of
the
what we'll talk
interruption.
about is
Your
how to.
presentation is not on presentation mode. We are looking at the next slide as well, so perhaps you
Oh, I am so sorry. Thank you for letting me know that. I will need a small amount of assistance because I have done this before and it has worked.
you can just use the little icon of a screen in the bottom
Yes,
of the PowerPoint.
that is what I did, but this did not work for you, right?
No, but you can continue the way it was if it's
Okay.
if it's
My sincere apology for this.
Don't worry.
We will go this way and hope. Thank you. Do you see the slide now, Luis?
Not yet. You have to share your screen.
Okay, I stopped that and I start again.
Perfect.
Okay.
It works now.
Thank you all. Apologies for that. So we talk about the US market, both because it is geographically close, but also because even in the time of COVID, it is the largest buyer of fish and seafood in the world. In the last 12 months or so, the US imported over $22 billion in fish and seafood, which represents about 1 out of every $8 purchased globally. And the amount of fish and seafood purchased into the US or imported is up, tripled in the last 25 years. As many of us know, just before COVID, 90% of all seafood eaten in the US by value was imported from another country. We see the US market poised to grow tremendously in the next few years. Why? For the last decade, we have traced and tracked the US consumers' intention about what they care to eat. For the last 2 years, and nearly 3 years actually, 1 out of 5 consumers say they want to eat less beef. This has been fairly steady and has actually been the foundation for changes in what we eat in the US that have already been observed. But this year, for the first time, the top choice for replacing meat is to eat more fish and seafood instead. And for the first time ever, this is the more popular choice among consumers, about half, than simply eating a smaller portion of meat, or plant-based meat replacements, which have fallen quickly out of favor once they've become available and tasted. So for the first time ever, most consumers who want to eat less meat, 1 out of 5, would prefer to eat fish and seafood instead. Acting on that would tremendously increase overall consumption of fish and seafood in the US. The consumers who are looking to eat more fish and seafood also, as we've found, would prefer to buy different types of fish and seafood than they do now. So in thinking about how to satisfy the US market, it's not necessarily about producing more of the same or more commodities like those from everywhere else on the planet. It is about increasing variety and new flavors. When we look at the US restaurant industry just before COVID and going back over a decade, we find to no surprise that shrimp has consistently been the most popular type of fish and seafood offered in the US, followed by salmon, which a few years ago became more popular than tuna and crab. Of all of the types in fish and seafood we eat, not just the few shown here, but the top 25 in popularity, only salmon is increasing in popularity. The rest are declining. What does this mean? It means that many other kinds of fish and seafood are now becoming more desirable to the American consumer. Octopus is increasing in popularity faster than any other type of fish and seafood, along with ahi tuna, such as that caught in the Caribbean. And there is lots of change underneath the top 4, shrimp, salmon, tuna, and crab, where new kinds of fish and shellfish are rapidly becoming more popular or less popular. This creates great opportunity to introduce new kinds of fish and seafood. The other change is a new wisdom. For many years and even decades, one of the sayings about the American market has been that Americans like wild fish. It's the healthy choice. Our study looking at American consumers by age or generation in which they are born show that this is no longer true. And the new wisdom is that ocean health and our health are connected through fish and seafood. Younger people do not automatically say, I only want wild fish, and do not automatically think that fish is the healthiest choice. Part of this is redefining health and sustainability as really one concept, not two. When we looked at the concerns in the ocean health that are preventing Americans from eating more fish and seafood, we find that plastic contamination, radiation, forced labor, antibiotic use, all relatively new concerns, are extremely or somewhat of concern to most adults in the US and are influencing their choice about whether or not to eat fish or seafood at all. Concerns about ocean health today are preventing us from taking the opportunity to dramatically increase fish and seafood consumption. Americans want to eat more fish and seafood instead of meat, but they are concerned about the health of the ocean where we are growing or harvesting these marine foods. What this translates to for younger people, Generation Z, those who are still in their mid-20s, is that they have a much less of a preference for wild. Even those people who are in their 40s prefer wild fish less or farmed fish more than those who are about 57 or older. People who now are trying to eat healthy also are less likely to want to eat wild fish than the general US population. They see that what is going on in the ocean may affect their own health if they eat fish. And women in particular are very skeptical about both wild and farmed fish, compared to men who are increasingly accepting of aquaculture, even as they grow more skeptical of wild fishing. All of this is driven by changes in ocean health, like microplastics and radiation, which are not a consequence of fishing and are replacing older concerns about overfishing, but also getting out of reach of the seafood industry. So what can we do? When we look at the new belief that ocean health and our health are connected through fish and seafood, we see the challenge straight up. 93% of people in the US ate fish in the last week. That means despite these concerns, they're still eating fish and seafood some. We need to get them to eat it more often. Half do so for health reasons, and that half is a little more reluctant to eat fish and seafood. Only less than 1 out of 5 Americans now think that fish and seafood is safer than other protein choices. This is a consequence we see of raising issues of sustainable seafood and ocean health in isolation and not talking about fish and seafood compared to other types of protein choices like beef, pork, and poultry, where fish and seafood has so many advantages. Fish and seafood has become a bit confusing. We see that when one wants to invest in conservation, restoring oceans can boost the sale of seafood caught nearby. And here, conservation efforts in Latin America, over and beyond fishery management, may be a key connection for marketing fish and seafood. If, in breaking out of the commodity trap, we also make a point of saying this is benefiting fish and seafood that is harvested in Latin America and preserve that identity. geographic identity as it comes into the US. We'll talk about ways to do that in just a moment. Before we do, we want to share a lesson from chicken. And as Luis mentioned in the introduction, we've done work over a couple decades to help the poultry industry and the restaurant and grocery industry address antibiotic use in poultry production. One of the key things we found is that reducing antibiotics and claiming progress is not as valuable as simply stopping the use of antibiotics. In fact, oddly, producers that say we have cut back on antibiotics a little bit sometimes fare worse than those that do nothing. Why? Because when you point out antibiotic use, and Americans understand this leads to disease resistance and human illness, not good health, it's almost as if saying your fish is just a little bit old, rather than saying nothing at all. So for aquaculture in Latin America, we see incredible benefits from moving away from antibiotics, microbials, and pesticides as quickly as possible, rather than long-term reduction plans that are reported on often. Now we turn to COVID-19, which has transformed the US marketplace over the short term and also over the long term. On the left, we show through the end of summer, the change in seated restaurant diners, people who come in or come to a table outside to eat. Because of the restrictions and concerns about COVID-19, the number of diners coming to restaurants was reduced by about half. Now that winter and cold weather has arrived to the United States, we expect, along with greater incidence of COVID, the share of seated diners will again drop. This matters a lot because seated restaurants serve much more fish and seafood than takeaway restaurants do. They're also much more likely to sell higher priced fresh fish. And sadly, our analysis shows that because of the reduction in the number of customers sitting down to eat, perhaps half and as many as 3/4 of the restaurants that were open last year will close this winter and not open again, or will open under new ownership or a dramatically different format. We hear, of course, that because people still want to eat and must eat, a lot of the dollars they spend is now going to grocery retail. And that's very true. And the sale of fish and seafood through grocery retail has increased, but not as much as other proteins have benefited. And one of the reasons is the more highly priced fresh fish sales are suffering, not because of a reduction in grocery spending, but because Americans during COVID are going to the grocery store less often for fear of infection, because they are turned off by lines, and because we are just not out and about as much. So the number of people going into a grocery store on a given day is also down by more than half. Americans used to shop just over every 2 days in a grocery store. Now it's more than every 6 days, or about once a week. And because buying fresh fish is something we do when we go to the grocery, each time we go to the grocery store, and we want to eat that fresh fish in a day or two after we buy it, we are buying fresh fish less frequently, and of course not stocking up because we see it as so perishable. So COVID-19 has changed how we get fish. Declining sales in food service aren't offset by the more modest increase in volume in grocery retail. Less frequent shopping has reduced the purchase of fresh fish. And while we are buying more frozen fish and canned fish, we pay a lower price for those formats. So a commitment to taking fresh fish and repackaging it for frozen sale is also a commitment to selling it at a lower price. Yes, you can keep the inventory and not have it perish, but you are reducing your price or profitability. COVID-19 has also narrowed selections and eliminated the competition from new types of fish and seafood. The fish case on the left, which is all salmon, is not so uncommon nowadays, where supermarkets are working to get whatever inventory they can get in as quickly as possible and not worrying about assortments. So higher volume suppliers have an advantage here. We know that, for instance, Chilean salmon imports to the US by volume increased dramatically over the last few weeks as there's been less room on airplanes because there are fewer airplanes flying to the US from Europe. Also, COVID-19 has accelerated changes in how we cook and serve fish and seafood because Americans are staying home for a lot more, and we think that will continue for the next year. We're cooking for each other more, and we are not very good cooks, and we do not have a tradition of cooking a diversity of fish and seafood products. So right now we are favoring fish and seafood that can be served immediately upon purchase. Take it out of the package, put it on a plate, or perhaps put the entire package in the oven. And if it is sold in food service, it's often for takeaway. So again, products that taste good at room temperature and don't decline in quality much after they've been cooked or served. With all of that describing the boundaries of how we eat fish and seafood in the US now, we see tremendous opportunity. Americans want to eat more fish and seafood. Improving oceans makes eating fish and seafood more attractive. There are tremendous conservation programs underway in Latin America that if the seafood industry in Latin America makes American consumers more aware of them, we will favor Latin American seafood even more. Marketing fish and seafood based on a sense of place and flavor is the other big shift and a way to get out of the commodity trap and some of the challenges of COVID-19 marketing. So what do we mean by this? We mean giving people either fish and seafood that is clearly from Latin America, or sharing with them ways to eat it at home with simple cooking techniques, such as a curing process. And these can support differentiation, linking flavor to place. It makes Latin American seafood imports to the US distinct from imports from other places because the flavor is integral to where the fish and seafood comes from. You no longer compete against harvesters in other parts of the world. Also importantly, we see that smoked, cured, and chilled products and preparations, which are part of Latin American culinary tradition already, are new and interesting tastes in the US and fit exactly with how Americans now want to eat and serve fish and seafood. All of these can be unpackaged, put on the plate. If at a restaurant kept for quite some time at good quality while you take it home to eat, or if you buy these products at the market, will keep for a week until your next shopping trip, not for only a day or two, so you can stock up. We know that sea-cutery, or applying charcuterie or meat preservation techniques to fish and seafood, and other value-added opportunities can boost the Latin American seafood position in the market and break out of the commodity trap so that you also can get rewarded for conservation efforts, better management, and taking care of the ocean health and fisheries of Latin America. And with that, I thank you for your time and look forward to a conversation in the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Arlin, for your presentation. I think it gave us a lot of food for thought, a lot of information that it's started to put together a puzzle that with the previous presentations, the keynote presentations we had this morning, and the sessions we have, the networking sessions in the morning, and some of the alliances that were presented yesterday in the afternoon, continue to put together this puzzle and present a lot of opportunities Latin America. So that's what we wanted to produce with your presentation, to produce, to motivate and to produce discussions and to start a conversation and to make some actions, hopefully in the seafood sector in Latin America. I think we are basically out of time. I really would like the audience to ask questions through the chat box of the platform, and we need to move on to the next presentation. But before that, I will really like on behalf of the organization committee, thank you for your time and your support and your patience. Last summit in Merida, we wanted to have you in person. It was not possible, but this time I'm really glad to have you at least virtually. And please take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before the next presentation, I just want to let you know that all the recording presentations are going to be available in the webpage of the summit. There is a delay. Today we will have the recordings of yesterday, tomorrow the recordings of today. So you will have access to Arlin presentation in a recording manner tomorrow. Thank you very much, Arlin, and have a good day.
Hi, our next keynote speaker is Jim Cannon. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Fine, thank you. He's Jim. Well, thank you, Arlin,